Tiran Jackson. Welcome to Shadow Conversations.
What's going on, guys? How's it going?
We're
Doing
great.
good. Happy to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
So let's talk. We're just going to jump straight in, man.
Okay.
Your life changed on a dime. Tell us about the time.
So, go back 5 years ago, 2018. My wife Malika and I, we were celebrating our 15th wedding anniversary. We were both going through very busy times in our life and our career, and we were really looking forward to this opportunity to spend 5 days in the Bahamas with each other, really reconnecting. First 2 days were great. Had some time at the beach, some fruity drinks, time at the pool. On the third day, we decided we'd leave the resort and go do an excursion. So we got tickets to go on an excursion that was supposed to take off at 9 o'clock in the morning. It took off at 9 o'clock in the morning. However, 5 minutes of the ride, my life changed forever. I found myself waking up face down on the surface of a burning boat. Unbeknownst to us, there was a fuel leak that was emanating from the fuel tank, and we were sitting right above it. As I woke up, I realized that something tragic had happened. I found myself actually seeing that my left foot was severed, but I was still on the surface of the boat, but Malika was nowhere to be found. As I came to, I was actually pulled off of this boat by a second boat, and they told me that Malika was picked up and carried to a clinic by another boat. As they got me to shore and put me on the back of a pickup truck to ride from the place where we landed to the clinic, I was put on a stretcher and wheeled into the clinic, and that was the first time I heard Malika. I could hear her moans, her agony, her pain.
Okay.
And as I was there was one doctor, and there were three of us who were horribly injured. The doctor told me that they were sending me and this other young lady to the good hospital, and that Malika would come later that afternoon. They put me on an air ambulance, fly me to Nassau, get me an ER, and as they're starting to prep me for surgery, I'm saying, where is my wife? Is my wife here yet? They don't say anything. I go, they put me to sleep, prep me for surgery. I wake up a couple hours later, and as soon as I wake up, I see two doctors come in the room, and I ask them, where is my wife? The two doctors look at each other, and they leave the room. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the most obvious question I could have asked. And then after about 5 minutes, they come in. They tell me, Mr. Jackson, we hate to inform you, but your wife didn't make it. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that means the plane hadn't gotten here with my wife, because they told me she was on her way.
So you're thinking she physically did not make it to the location to join you at the hospital.
Right.
But that's not what they meant.
That's not what they meant. They told me that she died at that clinic. They didn't want to let me know that before they put me on the plane and sent me to this hospital. So when we were supposed to have this momentous celebratory time together, I mean, we were together for 15 years married, 17 years total. We thought we had our whole lives together and never thought that this vacation would turn out in this way.
So in this moment, technically, what happens? I'm just curious to know, like, how you were out of the country. How do you inform family members? What does the process of the next week look like?
So that was a crazy time. So first off, there was another couple who we had gotten to know on the bus ride from the resort to the marina, and started talking to him and his wife, and they got to know Malika and I just a little bit. This brother, he was on the back of that truck riding to that clinic with me, and while we were on that ride, I told him my mom's phone number, my sister's phone number, the room that we were in, the safe code where our passports were located, since they were staying at the same resort. So he committed that to memory, and when he got the opportunity, he started calling my family to notify them of what happened. If that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be here today. There's a whole deeper story behind all of that. But based on those things, it took some time before the authorities tried to notify my family. And had they waited until then to start actually trying to make provisions to come to the Bahamas and get me out of there, they would have kept me in the hospital. I would have died there.
Wow.
As a result of everything that happened when it happened, there was a hospital in Fort Lauderdale, Florida that had a grade A trauma center. and they basically confiscated me from the hospital in the Bahamas after 2 days. And when they got me there, they told my family, we've got to do whatever we can to make sure that he still lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go into surgery there and I wake up and my left leg is gone. They had to amputate my leg for me to survive. But they said if I would have spent another day, I probably would have died in the Bahamas. 2 days I would have for sure. I went through a situation where they tried to reattach what was left of my foot while I was in the hospital in the Bahamas, and it caused infection to start going through my body. So I remember laying in the bed and seeing the EKG monitor over my head and saw all my vital signs go from green to yellow to red. And I'm praying to God and trying to come to grips with the fact that you've already taken Malika.
Mm.
And I've already had to call our son, this 12-year-old boy staying with his aunt and uncle, and tell him over the phone that your mom's not coming home. And now I'm about to pass myself.
I'm curious to know, was there ever a moment since you came so close to death that you wish that you had died too?
So one of the things so the answer is yes. I did have that feeling. And even being alive after it was all said and done, I suffered with survivor's remorse. The guilt of knowing that I'm the one that booked that trip. That if I would have sat where she sat, she would potentially be here. But because of that, she's gone and I'm here.
Sitting with that tension and just understanding all of the loss you've experienced, and as Jonathan said, coming that close to death yourself, how did that loss impact how you view the world now?
Look, my perspective on life is so much different than it was before, and probably so much different than most people. I was at the truest state of despair that most people can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I was broken physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. I realized that I was very close to dying, and then the person who I love most, my wife, the mother of my child, my best friend, the person who I was expected to have my future with, was suddenly taken away from me. And I realized that there are certain decisions that we make and choices that we make that can dictate what happens to us, and then that there are certain things that we have no control over. And so in those aspects, and then one other piece is there was a key moment as I was going through my physical recovery, and I was in the hospital in Florida. I went through 5 surgeries in one day where they were trying to get me stabilized. The next day, I heard God's voice, and it talked to me so clearly. And he told me that he took Malika home because it was her time. But he also told me that if he wanted to take me, he could have taken me when that boat exploded. He could have taken me when my vital signs went to red in that hospital in the Bahamas. He could have taken me when I went through all those surgeries in Florida and was still unstable. But he kept me here for a reason, and that my purpose was going to be greater than anything that I had imagined before. He also told me I had to be resilient. That was the one theme that kept resonating. Be resilient. The obstacles I've overcome, just to still be alive, were nothing compared to the obstacles I was still going to have to face. And so hearing that and knowing that and understanding that there is a greater purpose definitely changed my perspective on how valuable the time that we have here on this earth is.
I can, even in your conversation, I can hear the perspective shift from sadness almost to more joy, more hopeful, from hopelessness to hopefulness.
Yes.
So as I'm sitting and listening,
That's good.
I guess my question is, let's rewind a bit. How was that first year after everything happened, that transition phase for you? Your new normal.
Yeah, my new normal. Well, God told me that my normal was not going to be what it once was. I was an engineer before. He told me I wasn't going to go back to doing that.
Okay.
That there was a different purpose, but I didn't know what that was.
And how soon did you hear God's voice saying that?
That was 5 days after the accident.
Wow.
This was July the 5th, 2018. I remember it clear as day. But I was still in the hospital bed. I was horribly injured. I had not just a left foot that was going to have to be removed, but a broken right foot, 3rd-degree burns on my right leg, fractured pelvis, fractured vertebrae, bruised ribs, broken collarbone. I was broken and couldn't move. And but in this space, like I said, as I was praying, and I had anger and frustration towards God with everything that happened, because why did this have to happen to us? That was my question. But but it was clear that my life was going to take a different turn. That there was a pivot there, and a major shift. So yeah, it didn't take long before I started realizing that even though I didn't know what that new normal was going to look like, it was going to be different. Now, getting back to the question, that first year, it was a lot of I want to say ups and downs, but more downs than ups. Because when you're used to having life under control, there's a sense of security there. And then when, I had to listen to doctors tell me that, well, it's going to be 8 months to a year before you walk with a prosthetic, and you might not walk like a normal person. That you're going to, that's one element, just getting past the physical deformation that I had, the change that I've had. Then when you stack on top of that the emotional loss, as I said, I lost the closest person to me unexpectedly, the one who had given me love and that I've put all of my heart and love behind. To have her taken away and know that the person who I was used to waking up next to and never see her again was a hard thing. To go to being a single father to a son who was emotionally broken as well, and learn how to try to be there and nurture him from both the fatherly and motherly side while I'm being pushed around in a wheelchair. Very difficult. So I had a lot of different elements that I was battling. And on top of it, my natural inclination was to go to a place of isolation. So I started cutting myself off from certain people, but at the same time, I started seeing that certain people were around me for the wrong reasons. I had people who wanted to say that they helped Ty and Cameron for attention. I had people who were trying to leverage, real talk, people who had wrong motives for wanting other people to see what they were doing, who were there when there was, attention and cameras, but then as soon as they're gone, they disappear. You never hear from them. So this led to another, and then I had to go through this whole identity shift. Who am I? Who will I be going forward? I'm not the same person. I could look in the mirror and see I wasn't the same person. Physically, I was changed. Emotionally, I wasn't thinking the same. I was suffering from depression, anxiety, from all of these other things that I'd never done therapy in 39 years of life before that, and now I'm having to realize that if I didn't do it, I was going to go crazy. And so it was a lot. And then my faith in God, it was there before, but then realizing that I needed him in order to get through these times and these things. So they talk about the term complicated grief. Look, my grief was, it was complicated and then some. But this was part of my story, part of my journey and what I had to do. But I understood that, God chooses people to have to go through certain trials and tribulations to show the glory and the honor and the belief in him to get through those situations, serve as examples. And so once I gathered that, I started to be at least a little bit more at peace as I was fighting these battles.
I'm curious to know, I'll say this first. Maybe a few months after my mom died, the reality has set in that she's gone. I've accepted that. But, we all got our social media feeds. We're closing in on Mother's Day. And Mother's Day finally gets here. And I'm going to be straight up about this. There's a sense of envy and disdain I have as I go through my feed. Not only that year, but throughout the continuum of time, even up until today, where I look at this and it's just like, I don't want to see you and your mom. And it is not towards the person, but it's very real. Did you ever find yourself looking at other couples just this ain't it?
I mean, even worse, when I see other couples on vacation and their pictures on the beach and doing those things, I'm thinking to myself, well, that my bad. Try to keep it good, clean.
But it's real, and this is something that we can never say to anybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, there was definitely some feelings of anger and frustration to see other people happy and understanding, especially during that first year. myself not being able, just struggling to survive and losing the person I cared about most.
Yeah.
And I honestly had to just get off of social media for about 8 or 9 months.
Okay.
And so that was probably from a from a emotional recovery standpoint, one of the better decisions that I could have made
Yes.
in order to keep from those feelings, that sense of jealousy and envy and regret to linger.
Yeah.
And so
That's real.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
In the midst of loss and in the midst of grief, you have to make sure that you are well. And it sounds like one of those practices were for you was to take a hiatus from social media, and that's okay. Going back to when my father passed, a couple weeks after, people are still texting, "Hey, how you doing?" Checking in, but days, weeks go by, and then all the check-ins subside,
yeah,
It's
Yeah.
like, did you forget?
yeah,
and then it's silence.
Yeah.
And you have to sit with that reality of your new normal. As you were in that process, what were some of the things or conversations that were most beneficial for you in that process? So, as the noise began to silence and you sat with that reality, what was most helpful for you as you navigated through that period?
So what was most helpful for me, and it was due to circumstances. When I was I was in the hospital in Florida for 2 weeks before they discharged me, and I had to go live with my sister for another 2 months because at that point in time, physically, I wasn't able to really function, and they told me that you just need to be somewhere settled. My bond with my older sister became even stronger than what it was because she was my source to be able to talk through things. She was the one who was there for me and really starting to pose the questions on what life is going to look like moving forward. And so, whereas I didn't need, and I did have a few friends who would stop by and talk to me, but I realized, like you said, after a certain amount of time, all of those check-ins, they stop.
Yes.
And you start to think that, well, nobody cares anymore. Nobody cares about me. And that was something that I felt to some extent, but at the same time, I really wasn't ready to constantly be reminded of the fact that I had this loss. And so even though I had to accept it, but it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to have somebody else constantly telling you this.
Okay. Gotcha. So you had accepted it internally, but people doing these check-ins was almost like a reinforcement of like,
Yeah.
and as you're trying to move on.
Yeah.
So it gives me kind of both. It's like, it's good to be remembered, good to be thought of. I appreciate that. But at the same time, as I am trying to move on, you checking in on me is reminding me like, this really did happen. Is that what you're getting at?
So let me go even deeper. Let me put it like this. When you have the right spirit, the right type of people checking in with you, that helped me during my times of grief and the pain, because they were actually supporting me and trying to speak in a positive, not just in a positive light, but help nurture me as I was trying to deal with my pain. Now, my former wife, and just to give a little background, we met at college at Tennessee State. She was an AKA. She had 123 line sisters. Okay.
Wow.
So it was a lot of them.
Okay, line.
It was a lot of them.
What was her name?
Her name was Malika.
What was her line name?
Her line name was Light Switch.
Light switch.
Okay.
Yeah. She turn it on and turn it off in a heartbeat. It changes like that.
All right.
So anyway, I say that to say that there were a number of those line sisters who would talk to her every 2 months or so. This was their normal rhythm or routine.
Okay.
their means of processing the grief was different than my means. So whereas I had to live with this every day that she wasn't here,
Mm-hmm.
2 months would pass and they would go back as if it just happened when they talked to me. So
Yeah.
they in this, just whenever there was an anniversary for their line, or if it was something, an event that they would typically do together, this is when I would get this onrush of people reaching out to me. And at that point in time, they were pulling me back and feeling that grief even greater during those times. When I've started the healing process, they're reminding me of things because they haven't moved forward in their grief.
I see.
Okay.
That's good. So that makes me think about certain days in the calendar year, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. From what I'm hearing, the people that were checking in on you as you were moving forward in your healing journey, checking in on those specific anniversaries or birthdays was pulling you back.
Some of them were, yes. Some of them were,
That's-
and it depends on the. And here's where I'm real particular about the energy and the spirit of people.
Okay.
Some people can do it in a, like I said, in a supportive, nurturing way, and some can really try to pull you back into, well, I remember when she was, and in a sense, stunt the recovery process from your grief. So I was after it took me some time
Okay.
to filter through, who was really helping me and who, after I had conversations with them, brought me to a dark place.
Tiran, let's help somebody here. I know everything is highly individualistic from person to person, but what is a good way to check in on somebody
Well,
who is grieving? What is a good thing to say? I'm sorry, it's very popular.
yeah, it is.
Praying hands emojis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sending praying hands.
Keeping you lifted.
Yeah.
Prayers up.
Yeah, prayers up. Yeah.
It's a tricky situation because these are the things that we're used to saying, used to hearing when somebody passes. And some of the best things that I realized or I found was when certain people would, not just ask me how I was doing, but wanted to let me know about a positive dream or thought that they had of Malika, and wanted to share that and let me know that they were remembering a good time or a good time that they saw us have together, and just wanted to let me know that she popped up in their visions and their thoughts and dreams. What this did was bring up, most of the time, positive emotions from me because I was recollecting about those memories as well, those thoughts. And then the ones who, look, I was in a position where me and my son, we weren't used to cooking. I had those friends who started a meal train and they was like, okay, we're going to bring you some food every other day and all. Look, that's a great way to check up on somebody who's trying to get through it. And it didn't just end right after, she passed and everything happened. So I did have people who were willing to, sacrifice a little bit of their time and, a little bit to make sure that we were at least taken care of in that regard. So for myself, and my son was a growing boy at that time. He still is, but yeah, no, that definitely filled a void and filled a need. And I think that's one of the things when someone is grieving, when you really talk to someone beyond that surface, I'm sorry, and my condolences, what do you really need? And have that person think about what areas can you help me with as I try to, just to make life a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Because, and
help with life,
yeah,
not necessarily remind me of the event
right,
that took place.
yeah.
That's good. It was difficult for me to articulate when my father passed. People would ask, so what do you need? How can I help? I was unable to articulate that. I didn't know. I didn't know what to say. What do you need? I don't know. I need my father back, but
Exactly. That's
get
the
that.
clearest thing. I need us to go back to the calendar date in which my life was normal.
Yeah.
So thinking about this range of emotions that we experience when we go through grief and loss, what does joy look like for you now?
Joy looks like fulfillment because I realize the transformation that this journey has brought me on. I went from understanding that whereas I might have been more selfish at one point in time, I'm selfless now, and I understand that the journey that I've gone through can help other people, and that this is a bigger reason why, a bigger purpose in my life. And I enjoy seeing and knowing that I've helped somebody get from that place of being stuck and paralyzed after something has happened. They've had this loss, they're feeling this emotional pain, but helping them work their way through it. And not to say that that's something that is just it's different for everybody. Our grief journeys are different, but to be able to start to hone in on those questions where they think about, what do I really need? Oftentimes when we're grieving, we have this confused perspective. We're walking in this fog where we can't do things the same way. We don't think as clearly as we normally do. And so things that can simplify life for us really help us out. And that's where I see value in being able to help others who are, not functioning at the same capability that they were before because of this shock that they're feeling.
We can go on for hours. We're running close to time. I want to ask you a couple quick questions here.
Okay.
With your son, he lost a mother, you lost a wife. I've told people for years the grief that my dad has and the grief that I have, they're totally different. The way I reflect, because of my age and because of the relationship I had with my mother, it's totally different. Did you find that in your household?
Yes.
That he was in almost a different world than you may have been in?
Yeah. Definitely. It was different. At the time, both Malika and I, we were very busy with our jobs, and she would have to travel to Chicago for a week at a time, and I would be at home with Cam, and then when she would come back, I would be gone for a week. Well, in his mind, he was in denial for a long time and compartmentalized it as if mom was just gone on a work trip and hadn't come back. And then for another significant amount of time, it took forever. It took a while for him to actually want to know what happened. And so there were elements where I'd have to be careful about how much detail I gave around him, because he would want to either remove himself or would break down crying because he didn't want to fully accept that.
So, if I can jump in, how do you deal with that? This was a high-profile situation. This was in the news. There's a legal component to it. There are things that make this very public. How did you deal with that? He didn't want to hear it.
Yeah, it was a challenge because it was on TV. He wasn't watching the news too much, but there would be a lot of calls, conversations, things that I would have to have, and I would almost have to go in our basement to have those conversations because I knew he didn't want to overhear those things. And like you said, from a legal side, there'd be time where I'd have to talk to the lawyers in the house, and he would go in his room and close the door because he didn't want to have any knowledge, or where he didn't want to know about it. He didn't want to be reminded that his mom was no longer coming back. And so those were some difficult times. And then, but one of the things that I will say is, as soon as I got back to Atlanta after staying with my sister, I made sure that we got us some good grief counseling and therapy, not just for us individually, but together to start to talk about how he was really feeling. And even though it was hard to pull some of the things out, but those, you go through it, eventually it becomes a little bit easier. And we were able to talk about the hole that he felt by the only woman who he's ever really known in his life no longer being there.
Yes.
And so it was different. It was different, but I had to be mindful of the pain that he was feeling at times, being the son of a mother who passed away.
I think as Black men, and in the culture and society that we find ourselves in, it's taboo for men in general to display a posture of weakness, or even verbalizing the fact that you need some help.
Being vulnerable.
Being vulnerable. Yeah. after my dad passed, I went through grief counseling for a year
Yeah.
through Duke Bereavement and Hospice Services. He
Mhm.
passed in Durham, North Carolina. And that process was very transformative.
Mhm.
And it gave me a new lens to which I could see the world and how I could see my grief experience. One of the things that was beneficial for me was I felt very present with nature.
Mhm.
One of my assignments was to go on a nature walk and to see what you glean from that experience. And as I went on that walk and I went back to therapy and I shared that I felt noticed
Mhm.
by nature. I felt that the trees saw me. I felt that the grass was bending towards me as I was walking. This sense of being noticed and being seen, I think is very key and very important and impactful as we continue to go through our grief experience. Right, it's not just a one-time thing.
Right.
It doesn't just happen and you get over it. Especially around holidays.
Right.
Holidays have a tendency to bring back those memories, be it good or bad. How do you find yourself dealing with the holidays? Any traditions that you had before that you are leaning into now? Maybe some new tradition that you're building.
Well, I'll say this: the first year is really is hard. It's hard because
It's
you're so
awful,
used to
man.
you're so used to the things that we did,
Yes.
and
And I
No.
would say too that there's a instantaneous sense of recollection. The first year, it was like we were planning to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can look in your email account and say, okay, I had already booked the hotel,
Yep.
or like we were just talking about this, this time last year that we were going to do X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z. and you realize that that's not only what you're not going to do, but it's impossible to do.
Right. In my situation, Malika was essentially the centerpiece, the cog that pulled a lot of her family together. And also when we do Thanksgiving and do Christmas, it was at our house and she would cook and host. And so everything was centered around her. And for that not to be there, there was definitely a major void. And even though, we tried to do things, it wasn't the same. And it took a while for me and my son and family to be able to adapt to the change, to what was different, to honor what we had. And then, when you go back and look at previous pictures and things, it does, bring that sense of joy, but that sense of sadness that we'll never be able to experience this again because she's no longer here. But once we got through the first and second year, we started realizing that, okay, there might be a couple of new ways we need to go about doing things. And we started, I started doing a crab boil because that's something I could do as opposed to trying to do all, from just different elements that show the evolution of what life is going to be like with this new normal. And not completely forget about her and what she did, but recognize that we had those great moments and that was the way that we did it. But it's just going to have to be a little bit different moving forward.
Yeah, I think there was a time when my dad tried to make something my mom used to cook, and I was like,
Fail. Nice try, bud.
Hey.
let's not do this. And
Yeah.
just this is gone.
Yeah.
But that speaks to the difference in the grief processes. As we wrap up here, I want to help somebody. Few words to help somebody who is trying to date again after grief.
So I would say this, make sure that you've started the process or at least move forward with the process of loving yourself, making yourself whole again. Part of my journey was, and I was never a writer, but to get deep into journaling, but in going through my process, I learned vulnerability that we talked about. I was more open than I ever was about my emotions and feelings. And this level of authenticity of learning who I was. Because I was so used to being, Ty and Malika, us
Yeah.
together and then having that taken away. And we all lose that person and that piece of us that's gone. But what it really did was allow me to dig deep and figure out who I was. And when you know yourself and you start to understand your ambitions, what you love, what you're actually drawn to and attracted to, then it made it easier for me to finally say, okay, I'm healed to a point to be able to start looking at dating again. And so, yeah, there was a part of me that was like, okay, I'll never date again. And then there was a part of me that said, okay, I'm ready to get back out there. But that was somewhat premature. And then there was something else that was funny. I mentioned to you guys that my wife, she had a whole lot of line sisters and a whole
Yes.
lot of friends and everything.
Okay.
And I thought back to when I was trying to go through this whole thought process of dating again, there was something that kept resonating in my head. And there was a conversation that Malika and I had. Actually, this was about a year before the accident occurred. We were watching the movie, somebody passed away, and after she asked one of these what if questions. What if something were to happen to me? Well, her answer to me, which I mean, that was a gift from God to be able to have this conversation,
The
not
conversation
expecting
that
anything.
most people don't
Right.
ever have.
Yes.
Right.
And she thought about it and she told me, Ty, if something were to happen to me, I wouldn't want you to grieve for too long. I wouldn't want you to mourn to a place where you can't go out and find happiness again.
Mm.
And then after that, she thought for a second, and then she came with this list. And on this list were the names of 7 women. That she said, under no circumstances whatsoever should these women be in my house, be around my son, start trying to send you messages.
Get
Like, them ain't my friends.
out of here. A list.
A list, yeah.
First and last name.
Oh, some of them, she just said first name. I knew who she was talking about.
Yep.
So-
Got it.
But what she told me, what was ultimately I took away from her was after she said that was that I want you to do everything that you can to make sure that the only part of me that's still left on this earth is well taken care of. And that was our son, Cameron. So when I found myself in situations and times where I didn't want to push, I didn't want to move forward, I had to think back about that promise that I made to her during that random conversation, or so I thought at the time, about how I would honor your request.
That's real.
This has been rich. It's been fulfilling. It's been enlightening.
All of it.
It's given all the feels, feeling all the feels. Can you say a little bit about Happily Ever Interrupted? and what
Happily
that
ever
is?
interrupted. So happily ever. So as far as my transition, as I mentioned, I'm a different person than I was before. And so my business, my platform is called Reborn Resilient.
Okay.
Because as I mentioned, God told me clearly to be resilient. And I was reborn on the day that that accident happened and that I lost my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And so through my platform, I not only do inspirational speaking, but I also work to help build skills of resiliency with other people who are going through challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And for those individuals who lost a close loved one and do feel paralyzed and stuck and not understanding how they're going to move forward with life after that loss, Happily Ever Interrupted is intended to help them realize, hey, you had this plan before, but these are steps to help you overcome that grief and that trauma, help you build the resilience to deal with challenges when they come up in the future, and truly help them redesign what life looks like after that tragedy. So it's really about empowering those who feel like they can't move forward on their own because of the depression and the pain and the hurt that they're experiencing. But I hope to give others that hope and that inspiration that even though something unexpected can happen to us, that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And that there is a process, there is a roadmap, there is a framework to help basically accelerate the healing process and get you back on track with life again.
I gotta ask this, and this is kind of like just being straight up. How do you deal with people who think you're rich after you experience a loss?
Yeah.
Just being honest.
Yeah, no.
For some folks, it's a bit of a money grab.
Yep.
It sure is.
You know, I think that what I've had to do was to So I went through this period where I did provide for more people than I should have
Mm-hmm.
and do things for people. And I think that created a bad precedent.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the times, I'll be one that say, look, I don't got it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
whether it's true or not, they don't know that. So I just, but I want to make sure that, because yeah, you're right. Some people, and to me, this goes to show where the mindset of that person is in that motive.
Absolutely.
If they are already thinking in that way, then that tells me a lot right there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that is something that, and ironically, like one of the things that I do is I've spoken at multiple life insurance companies
Okay.
because of, that's the psyche of someone who's going through that type of loss is emotionally is one thing, but then they need to be able to interact with that person feeling that pain and that grief too. But then the after effect of it, when things calm down and a couple months have passed, and like you said, you've got people who are looking to basically benefit from your loss.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I know we shouldn't do it, but sometimes I lie just to keep from having to, yeah.
Sage advice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for that. How was your now ex-wife impacted by your engagement or expressions of your former wife?
Ooh, this was okay. So this was a interesting dynamic. I did get remarried about 2 years after the accident.
2 years.
2 years.
I want to put a pin there because that's one of the biggest age-old conversations ever. How soon is
When
too
it's too
soon,
soon,
and
yeah.
how long is too long?
Yeah.
Did you go through that? Was that in your psyche, and were there other voices?
I did, and everybody has an opinion.
Everybody
Mhm.
does.
And so this was one of those things where I had to block out the noise and go with where my heart and where God was guiding me.
Yes.
I realized that, yeah, and honestly, with the in-laws, with Malika's family, some of them were accepting, some of them didn't want to have anything to do with me after moving forward from their niece or cousin or whatever no longer be. They thought that I was supposed to either be with her or be with nobody. So that led to an interesting change in dynamic. With my my now ex-wife, she started out being very supportive and understanding, and she realized that that Malika was always going to be a part of myself and Cam, even though she was no longer here.
Yes.
And that it wasn't a matter of replacing Malika, but just figuring out how to keep her memory around while still being able to move forward with our life together. So now I won't sit up here and say that it didn't lead to some stressful, difficult conversations, but yeah, she was very open to the fact that this is something that was a part of me, and that Malika's memory should be carried on.
But I imagine for your son, it's a bit more complicated.
Yeah. For him, it was very difficult for him because he was in this place where he was 14, 15, and he didn't want to open up to another woman initially as his dad's wife. That transition from being dad's wife to my bonus mom was a bumpy road. And so and so it was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge. But I will say that Kay loves that boy as if he were her own. Kay loves that boy as if he were her own. And he grew to love her and treat her as close to he could treat anyone to Malika. So they have a great relationship, and and honestly, he needed that motherly influence going through his teenage years. And I'm grateful and blessed that they had the opportunity to connect and for her to provide that for him. Because as much as I tried, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so So yeah, so